Buonasera. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to speak about my country, about Georgia I know, live, love, and work in. I do not know a lot in mineralogy, in agriculture, and very little in politics. But I want to tell you more things about its culture and how has it evolved over the country's newest history now. And how has it impacted my personal biography as a biography of a young Georgian woman working in arts. I was born in Georgia, in the country bounded to the west by the Black Sea, at the crossroads of Western Asia and Europe. Here in South Caucasus, fertile valleys are home to grapevines that have been cultivated to wine production for over 8,000 years. Archaeological remains suggest that as early as 4,000 years, the grape juice was placed in underground clay jars, qvevri, that are now listed in UNESCO Intangible Heritage lists. But, of course, this does not mean that Don Cristoforo de Castelli, the Italian missionary who traveled in my country in 1631 and reported about us to Europe, was quite true in mentioning that Georgians get weird, drunk and jolly. Well, we have a whole culture of drinking wine. And believe me, the truth heard from a Georgian is what I ardently seek in art pieces. For integrity of a Georgian man is that fundamental constitution that has always been essential for any kind of expression in arts or in literature. My language, Georgian, is one among 10 oldest languages still spoken in the world and one of 14 writing systems. No full agreement exists between Georgian and foreign scholars about the date of its origin. Well, Georgian compendium of medieval historical texts credits King of Iberia, Panavas, living in 4th century before Christ, to be the first monarch who created kingdom in Kartli, as well as Georgian alphabet. Georgia is the place where the Christ's clock bought of a Roman soldier at Golgotha is buried. But as official religion, Christianity was announced 326 years later by the first Christian king, Miriam, since Nina, equal to apostles, preached Christianity in Georgia. Well, King Miriam's ancestors, according to archaeological finds and references, raised early political formations such as Diauhi in 13th century before Christ and in 8th century Colchis, the place where Medea was born, granddaughter of sun god Helios and later wife to hero Jason, who together with the Argonauts delivered the golden fleece to Greece. But a series of stunning paleontological discoveries challenge a conventional view that Africa is the sole cradle of humankind. Scientists have found a number of skulls in Georgia that suggest a new Eurasian chapter in the evolutionary story of mankind. Sweet couple, Zi and Zezwa, living in Georgia 1.8 million years ago, suggested they are the first Europeans. And ever since they put a fire together, we have to fight for our land, our place, our country. Today, Georgia fights for its occupied territories of South Ossetia and Abkhazia that gained limited recognition as two de facto independent regions after 2008 Russian-Georgian war. Nevertheless, the major part of international community still considers these regions to be part of Georgia's sovereign territory under Russia's military occupation, which started in 1921 when Georgia was attacked by Russian army and a communist government was installed here nearly for 80 years, loyal to Moscow. So I am from the generation born in Soviet Union. My grandfather was the general who received the Distinguished Red Cross from President Roosevelt in recognition of extraordinary heroism and bravery displayed under fire on the battleground of Soviet-German war against our common enemy, Hitler Germany. But my grandmother kept this award in secret, for it contained a threat to spy motherland. And well, it was clear for me from very childhood that supreme virtue will anyway be acclaimed, nevertheless, any limits and boundaries. That was proved again when I studied in England, and as a teenager I was never recognized by the country where sweet couples, Zienzes, were lived, the cradle of humankind. But yet, and regretfully, from Soviet Union, from where thrilling films by Sergei Parajanov were smuggled to London, and great theatre of Rustaveli, with Robert Sturro's legendary Richard III speaking through lines of British genius about the worst creation of humankind, about the Soviet system and its dictators, was banned as Soviet. At first, London loudly protested against the Georgian theatre, Soviet theatre of Rustaveli. I'm demonstrating in front of the Roundhouse Theatre, but later being internationally acclaimed and praised, it left a cherished memory that often recognized my origin. So while living in England, I realized that I was from the extraordinary country where people were doing amazing things but had to hide or speak through metaphors because of political and historic developments. But the world around us kept an eye on us and cherished our achievements. Greatest of all, Peter Brook arrived to Georgia to meet masters of art and to witness these extraordinary people and the way of life that led to such thrilling inventions in arts and in literature. You need to go to Tbilisi to see Molière. This is the best I have ever seen. Fast, modern, brilliantly performed by young Georgian actors whose wit and energy flies through every fiber in their bodies. These are Peter Brook's words, said about iconic production of Don Juan, directed by Mikhail Tumanishvili. Great theatre director, Robert Sturro's teacher, and our late maestro. After meeting with Mikhail Tumanishvili and seeing his productions, Peter Brook decided to personally introduce Georgian theatre to the world. So he took his productions and traveled all around the world at international theatre festivals and culture centers that actually simulated institution of Georgian International Festival of Arts, Gift Festival, annual celebration, both bringing the best of visiting arts to Georgia as well as introducing our country's cultural profile internationally. The Gift Festival was initiated, created, and patronized by International Board of Directors of Edinburgh, Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne Art Festivals, and up to date being supported by Peter Brook, Vanessa Redgrave, Michael Kahn, Rob Brookman, Jan Scobie, Florence Intercity Festival, and many others to count. They made up a plan and programmed the first ever Gift Festival long before its actual establishment, because Soviet Union would never allow Georgia to have its independent foreign policy. But when it's finally established in 1997, that was the time that I returned back from Great Britain. Country was yet recovering from the ravages of recent conflicts, devastated by separatism in outbreak regions. In those years of desperation, lacking electricity, food, petrol, jobs, nation was losing the generation. Artistic director of the festival, Tortladze, Georgia's dramatic figure and public activist, film and theatre director, honored for her heroic actions during the Civil War, and personally assigned to her job by Mikhail Tumanishvili, invited me to run and organize Georgian International Festival of Arts as a general manager at my age of 18. My job was almost unrealistic, hosting more than 500 international guests and 126 theatre productions and generally art productions in Georgia across 20 venues, desperately needing renovation was simply surreal. But together with Edinburgh Festival management team who arrived to share their experience and practice, we committed and inspired daring and braveless and fearless. We instituted and built up the first such scales art institution in Caucasus. But I need to tell you that the time was very desperate. Last decade of the 20th century was extremely tense for Georgia. Political developments during our fight from then Soviet Union and for our fight for independence from Soviet Union, and then later our struggle to build up new social or state institutions maintaining this independence brought another 3 years of civil conflict and a whole decade of political instability with ongoing financial, social, historical and economic crisis. In 1989, on April 9th, Georgians took to the streets to demand independence from the Soviet Union. At the peak of demonstration, hundreds of thousands of people, some of them on hunger strike, gathered in front of Tbilisi Parliament building. The demonstration was dispersed by Russian army, ending in 20 deaths, mainly women, and many injured. That was one of the defining moments in the late Soviet history. 9 April killings in Tbilisi greatly accelerated the push for independence and for the end of Soviet domination. A year later, in 1990, exactly on April 9th, Georgia adopted the Declaration of Independence, but the situation began to stabilize only in 96, 97, when the government and President Tortladze supported Katie and her team to do the festival and to build up the Georgian International Festival of Arts, because the culture and Georgia really needed arena to spread a message of peace and reconciliation, for it has never been stagnant despite the restless history of Georgia. Since its inception, Gift Festival hosted more than 300 international productions and yet remains as one of the most important cultural platforms for international exchange and cooperation. Last 10 years in Georgia were quite radical and crucial. Famous Georgian Rose Revolution that brought the first bloodless change of power in Caucasus, brought new government, new reforms, new aid to our efforts to support democracy in my country. But in the lights of democracy, Gift Festival was banned only because its artistic director was in opposition to the parliament, to the president. Robert Sturua, the greatest theatre director, was dismissed from his position of artistic director of the Rustaveli National Theatre only because he was in radical opposition to the president. Artists and their creations were grouped by sides and either rebelled or voiced the government. So Georgia had fallen from the initial promises of Rose Revolution. I myself, being producer of international relations at Rustaveli National Theatre, had to fight for my prime policy, legacy, policy, and just, so as many other people at their jobs in other cities. So it was evident that such developments would have had out a popular support to opposition to a new political party, Georgian Dream Coalition. But everyone understood that from Georgian dream to Georgian reality, each of us and everyone needs to contribute, supporting the only idea of progress and advancement. Gift Festival is back, and we successfully deliver professional experience with unique international productions, combining the opportunity to explore rich culture of Georgia. Robert Sturua is back, and he runs the Rustaveli National Theatre, where in 2006, I myself, eager to participate in revolution, returned back to London to pick up some ideas to replicate them in Georgia, which were quite successful. My tries were quite successful. I raised up $100,000 and facilitated memorandum between the National Theatre of London and Rustaveli National Theatre. As a chair of Georgian British Culture Platform, a voluntary art organization registered in Georgia, but with an aim to promote British culture, but importantly to support and stimulate partnership relationships between two countries, to help Georgia, to support Georgia to actively join European culture community, because I know that I am from the generation that knows very well the truth of being Georgian means being European, a free citizen of a liberal, democratic, free country that contributes into the mankind's development with its culture and extraordinary spirit. Thank you.